The stars had never looked so cold to Commander Tae-Soo as they did through the viewport of Coalition Station Primus. He stood alone in the observation deck, watching ships come and go. Massive Voltesh battlecruisers, sleek trading vessels from a dozen different worlds. All of them free to travel where they wished. All of them treated with respect, not like humans. Tae-Soo had served on this station for 12 years. 12 years of watching, waiting, and swallowing his pride. Every morning he woke up in the human quarters, 3 levels below the main residential areas. Every morning he put on his uniform with the small blue patch that marked him as a protected species. Every morning he reminded himself why humanity had accepted this arrangement. The alternative had been extinction. When humans first left Earth with their fusion drives, they thought they were alone in the universe. They were wrong. The Voltesh Empire found them first. The Voltesh had ruled this part of space for thousands of years. They had weapons that could turn planets to dust. They had technology that seemed like magic to the humans of that time. The choice had been simple. Join the coalition as a protected species, or face destruction. Humanity chose survival. That was 147 years ago. 7 generations had grown up under Voltesh rule. 7 generations had learned to bow their heads and accept their place. Tae-Soo turned from the viewport as the door opened. Hae-jin walked in, carrying a data pad. She looked tired. She always looked tired these days. They rejected it again, she said without greeting. Her voice was flat, emotionless. She had stopped expecting anything different months ago. The efficiency improvements? Tae-Soo asked, though he already knew the answer. All of them. Supervisor Kelvin didn't even read my report. He said human designs are too primitive for coalition systems. Hae-jin sat down heavily in one of the chairs. I've been working on those environmental systems for 8 years. I know them better than anyone on this station. But he won't listen. Tae-Soo said nothing. What could he say? This was the reality they lived in. Humans could maintain the systems, repair them, even improve them. But their ideas were never taken seriously. The coalition saw humans as useful workers, nothing more. There's more, Hae-jin continued. They're cutting power to the human quarters again. 20% reduction starting next week. They say it's for conservation, but the Voltesh levels are staying the same. Of course they are, Tae-Soo muttered. He made a mental note to adjust the schedule. Humans would have to rotate sleeping shifts to share heating. It would work, but it would be uncomfortable. Just another small humiliation to add to the list. His communicator buzzed. A message from the Central Command. Tae-Soo read it, and felt his stomach turn cold. What is it? Hae-jin asked, seeing his expression. We're getting a cultural compliance officer. He arrives tomorrow. Hae-jin closed her eyes. What does that mean? It means more restrictions, more supervision, more rules about what we can and cannot do. Tae-Soo pulled up the officer's profile on his own pad. His name is Thorvik. He's Voltesh. His record shows he specializes in managing primitive species. The words stung, but they were accurate. That was how the coalition saw humanity. Primitive. Dangerous. In need of constant supervision. Back on Earth, billions of humans lived under similar conditions. They could govern themselves in small matters, but all major decisions required coalition approval. Human ships could only travel on approved routes. Human research was monitored and controlled. Human history was being slowly edited, with certain parts labeled as inappropriate for young minds. The coalition feared what they called dangerous individualism. They looked at human history and saw nothing but war and chaos. They refused to see the art, the literature, the philosophy. They refused to see the good. Tae-Soo remembered his grandfather's stories. The old man had been born just after first contact. He remembered when humans still dreamed of exploring the galaxy on their own terms. He remembered the hope that had died when the Voltesh arrived. We should have fought, his grandfather used to say. Even if we lost, we should have fought, but they hadn't fought. They had chosen survival over pride. And now, 7 generations later, humanity was still paying the price. The next day, Cultural Compliance Officer Thorvik arrived on the station. He was tall, even for a Voltesh, with gray skin and 4 arms. He moved through the human quarters with a scanning device, recording everything he saw. Taesu followed him, required to be present during the inspection. Thorvik stopped in front of a mural that some human workers had painted on a wall. It showed Earth from space, surrounded by stars. "This must be removed," Thorvik said, making a note on his device. "It promotes planetary nationalism." "It's just a picture of home," Taesu said carefully. "It encourages humans to think of themselves as separate from the coalition. This is exactly the kind of dangerous thinking we must prevent." Thorvik moved on to a small library that the humans maintained. He pulled out books, scanning their contents. "Most of these will need to be confiscated. Earth history before coalition contact is no longer appropriate reading material." "Those are our stories," Taesu protested. "Our heritage. Your heritage is violence and chaos. The coalition has given you peace and order. You should be grateful." Thorvik placed another mark on his device. "I will return next week with a full list of required changes." "You will comply?" "Commander, that is not a request." After Thorvik left, Taesu sat in his small office and stared at the wall. Around him, the station hummed with activity. Humans working in the lower decks, maintaining the systems that kept everyone alive. Humans cleaning the corridors, preparing the food. Doing all the jobs that no one else wanted to do. And above them, the Valtesh and other coalition species lived in comfort, never thinking about the humans who made it all possible, never considering that those humans might have feelings, might have dreams, might have dignity. Taesu opened a secure channel to Earth. He needed to report Thorvik's arrival. He needed to warn them that more restrictions were coming, but as he typed his message, he wondered how much longer humans could endure this. How many more humiliations could they swallow? How many more generations would grow up knowing they were considered second-class citizens in their own galaxy? He didn't have answers. He only knew that something had to change. The question was when, and how much it would cost when it finally did. Outside his window, the stars continued to shine, cold and distant, indifferent to the struggles of one small species trying to find its place among them. Hana Station sat on the edge of coalition space, a small mining outpost that most people forgot existed. 3,000 humans worked there, pulling rare minerals from the asteroids that filled this region of space. The work was hard and dangerous, but the humans did it without complaint. They always did. Commander Woojin had run Hana Station for 6 years. He knew every corridor, every machine, every worker by name. He took pride in his station, even though it was just a small dot on the coalition's map. The miners trusted him, and he did everything he could to keep them safe. That morning started like any other. The day shift headed out to the mining tunnels while the night shift returned. Sujin, the station's medical officer, was finishing her rounds in the clinic. The cafeteria served breakfast. Everything was normal. Then the alarm sounded. Woojin ran to the control center. The display showed a collapse in Tunnel 7. A support beam had failed, bringing down half the tunnel with it. 47 miners were trapped inside. "Get me a damage report," Woojin ordered, his mind already racing through rescue options. "And contact the oversight vessel. We need their equipment." The coalition kept an oversight vessel in orbit above every major human installation. Officially, it was there to provide support. In reality, it was there to watch them. But right now, Woojin didn't care about the politics. That ship had advanced rescue equipment that could cut through the collapsed rock in hours instead of days. The communications officer opened a channel to the vessel. Captain Velkor's face appeared on the screen. He was Valtesh, like most of the coalition's military commanders. "Captain, we have an emergency," Woojin said quickly. "Tunnel collapse. 47 humans trapped. We need your rescue equipment immediately." Velkor looked at him with barely concealed boredom. "Commander, coalition regulations state that advanced equipment is reserved for military and priority personnel only. These are my people. They're dying down there." Woojin tried to keep his voice steady. "Your equipment is sitting unused in your cargo hold. Please, the regulations are clear. I cannot authorize the use of coalition property for non-military operations." Velkor's tone suggested the conversation was over. You have standard mining equipment. Use that. Standard equipment will take 3 days to clear that tunnel. My scans show life signs. But some of them are weak. They won't last 3 days. Wu Jin felt desperation creeping into his voice. I'm begging you. Help us save them. Your emotional appeals are noted, Commander. However, my orders come from Coalition Command, not from you. Use your own resources. Velcor out. The screen went dark. Wu Jin stood frozen for a moment, unable to believe what had just happened. Then he moved into action. If the Coalition wouldn't help, the humans would save their own. The rescue operation began immediately. Teams worked around the clock, using their basic equipment to dig through tons of collapsed rock. Sujin set up a medical station near the tunnel entrance, preparing for when they broke through. Every hour, they sent scanners into the debris, checking for life signs. 47 lights on the scanner. 47 people waiting to be saved. In the first 6 hours, they cleared 15 meters. It wasn't enough. The tunnel had collapsed for over 50 meters. At this rate, it would take days. Su Jin watched her scanner as the life signs began to change. Some were getting weaker. We're losing them, she told Wu Jin quietly. Their air supply is running out. Even if they have emergency tanks, they won't last more than 12 hours. Wu Jin contacted Captain Velcor again. And again. And again. Each time, the answer was the same. Regulations. Procedure. No. 3 kilometers above them, in the cargo hold of the oversight vessel, advanced rescue equipment sat gathering dust. Equipment that could cut through rock like paper. Equipment that could have saved 47 lives. The miners worked until their hands bled. They used cutting tools meant for ore, not rescue operations. They improvised, adapted, pushed themselves beyond exhaustion. But it wasn't enough. 12 hours after the collapse, the first life sign disappeared from Su Jin's scanner. Then another. Then 3 more. Wu Jin stood at the tunnel entrance, watching his people work desperately to save their friends. He thought about calling Velcor again, but he knew it was useless. The Coalition had made their position clear. Human lives were not worth bending the rules for. By the 18th hour, only 23 life signs remained. The rescue teams were still digging, but hope was fading. They were exhausted, running on adrenaline and determination alone. Sujin approached Wu Jin with tears on her face. I can see them on the deep scanner now. Some of them are writing messages on the tunnel walls. Messages for their families. Wu Jin closed his eyes. This was what defeat felt like. Not the loud, explosive kind, but the slow, grinding horror of watching people die while you stood helpless. 24 hours after the collapse, the last life sign faded from the scanner. 47 humans dead. 47 lives that could have been saved if the Coalition had helped. If the equipment had been used. If human lives had mattered as much as regulations. When the rescue teams finally broke through to the collapsed section 3 days later, they found exactly what Su Jin's scanner had shown. Bodies. Messages scratched into the rock, and in the center of it all, the emergency beacon that had kept transmitting until the very end, calling for help that never came. The funeral was held in the station's main bay. 3,000 humans gathered to say goodbye to their friends, their family, their colleagues. They stood in silence as the names were read. They wept as the bodies were committed to space, as was the custom for those who died in the dark. Wu Jin gave the eulogy. He spoke of bravery and sacrifice. He spoke of the mining community, and how they took care of each other. He didn't mention the Coalition. He didn't mention Captain Velcor, but everyone knew. Everyone understood what had really killed those 47 people. Indifference. The day after the funeral, Coalition officials arrived to conduct an investigation. They spent 3 hours on the station, reviewed some reports, and left. Their conclusion was delivered in a brief statement. Regrettable mining accident, human safety protocols under review. Nothing about the equipment that sat unused. Nothing about the requests that were denied. Nothing about the 47 lives that could have been saved. When Captain Velcor contacted the station to discuss the next mining quota, Wu Jin couldn't contain his anger anymore. "You let them die," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "You had the equipment. You had the power to save them. And you chose not to. Commander, you are addressing a coalition officer. You will moderate your tone." Velkor's voice was cold. "Moderate my tone? 47 people are dead because you wouldn't lift a finger to help them. Those people died because human mining safety standards are inadequate. That is not coalition responsibility. They died because you value regulations more than lives." Wu Jin slammed his fist on the console. "They died because we're not worth saving to you. Commander Wu Jin, you are hereby charged with insubordination to a coalition superior officer. You will be placed under arrest and transported to a detention facility pending trial." The screen went dark before Wu Jin could respond. Coalition security arrived 2 hours later. They took Wu Jin from his station in restraints, while the miners watched in silence. No one protested. They had learned long ago that protesting only made things worse. The trial lasted 15 minutes. Wu Jin was sentenced to 20 years in detention. The official record stated that he had become emotionally unstable following the mining accident and had verbally assaulted a coalition officer. Back on Hana Station, the miners returned to work. They had quotas to meet. The coalition announced a quota increase to make up for lost productivity during the rescue operation. But something had changed. In the quiet moments, in the whispered conversations, in the looks that passed between workers, something new was growing. It was anger. And it was spreading. The news from Hana Station spread through human space like wildfire. On Earth, in the colonies, on every station where humans lived and worked, people heard about the 47 miners who died while rescue equipment sat unused above them. They heard about Commander Wu Jin, arrested for demanding answers. Nara, a young historian living in Seoul, started compiling something she called the Ledger. She gathered every incident, every humiliation, every time a human had been denied basic dignity over the past 147 years. The document grew larger every day. Thousands of pages. Tens of thousands of individual stories. She worked in secret, knowing that the coalition monitored human communications. But she wasn't the only one keeping records. All across human space, people were documenting their experiences. Waiting, remembering. Then came the Kryn. Nobody knew where they came from. They appeared at the edge of coalition space 6 months after Hana Station. Ships unlike anything the galaxy had seen before, moving in perfect coordination. A hive mind species, intelligence shared across millions of individuals, working as one. The first coalition patrol that encountered them was destroyed in minutes. No warning, no communication, just sudden and overwhelming violence. The Voltesh Empire had ruled this region of space for thousands of years. Their military was the strongest in the coalition. They had never faced a serious threat. The Kryn changed that. Battle after battle, the coalition fleet was beaten back. The Kryn adapted to every tactic within days. What worked once, never worked again. Entire star systems fell. Billions died. The Coalition Council called for general mobilization. Every member species had to contribute ships and crews to the war effort. Even the protected species. Admiral Hyun-sik received the orders at his command post on Mars. Humanity was to provide 20% of its fleet and crews. They would serve under Voltesh command, as always. They would take orders, as always. They would be given support roles, as always. Hyun-sik was the highest-ranking human in coalition military service. He had fought for 40 years to reach that position, proving himself in dozens of engagements. He knew warfare like few others did. And he saw immediately what the coalition was doing wrong. He spent 3 days preparing a detailed battle plan. He studied the Kryn tactics, analyzed their patterns, drew on human military history. Humanity had fought countless wars on Earth before first contact. They understood asymmetric warfare, adaptive strategy, unpredictable tactics. The coalition only knew rigid doctrine. Hyun-sik presented his plan to the War Council. The room was full of Voltesh commanders, a few representatives from other major species, and him, the only human. He explained how the Kryn adapted to predictable patterns. He showed how varying tactics could confuse their coordination. He demonstrated how smaller, faster ships could exploit weaknesses in their formation. The Voltesh Supreme Commander listened for 5 minutes, then cut him off. "Admiral, your analysis is interesting, but we have established doctrine that has served the coalition for millennia. We will not abandon proven methods based on primitive human theories of warfare. Supreme Commander, with respect, your proven methods have lost 12 major engagements against the Kryn. My plan accounts for their adaptive capabilities. Humans will follow established doctrine, Admiral. That is an order." The meeting ended. Hyun-sik's plan was filed away, unread by anyone who mattered. The coalition fleet launched its next offensive using established doctrine. The Kryn tore them apart. 3 entire battle groups destroyed. 12 billion lives lost across 7 worlds. Hyun-sik sat in his quarters, staring at casualty reports. Thousands of humans had died in that battle, following orders that he knew were wrong, following doctrine that guaranteed failure. Then he received the classified directive. It came directly from the Coalition High Command, marked for senior officers only. Hyun-sik read it 3 times, unable to believe what he was seeing. The Coalition had made a decision. They would conduct a strategic withdrawal, evacuating the most valuable populations first. Priority 1. Voltesh worlds. Priority 2. Advanced species with critical technology. Priority 3. Major economic centers. Protected species were Priority 7. The last category. Acceptable losses. 43 human colonies were marked for abandonment. 290 million people would be left behind as the coalition retreated. They would be sacrificed to buy time for the evacuation of more valuable species. The document was clear, direct, brutal in its honesty. Human lives simply mattered less. Hyun-sik made a copy of the directive. Then he broadcast it on every human communication channel in coalition space. Encrypted channels, public networks, emergency frequencies. Within hours, every human in the galaxy knew the truth. They were expendable. On Earth, Prime Coordinator Da-hye called an emergency session of the Human Assembly. Representatives from every human world gathered virtually, their faces showing the same mixture of rage and despair. They finally said it out loud. Da-hye began, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "What we've always known, but they pretended wasn't true. We are not citizens of the coalition. We are tools, and when tools are no longer useful, they are discarded." The chamber was silent. 147 years of submission, of swallowing pride, of accepting humiliation, all of it had led to this moment. "To this truth, I call for a vote," Da-hye continued. "Do we continue to serve a coalition that sees us as expendable? Or do we choose our own path?" The vote was unanimous. 400 representatives, every single one, voted the same way. After 147 years, humanity said enough. The withdrawal order went out immediately. Every human in coalition service received the same message: come home. Military personnel, civilian workers, diplomats, scientists, engineers, all of them. Come home. On Coalition Station Primus, Commander Tae-soo gathered the human workers in the main assembly area. There were hundreds of them. Faces he had known for years. "Pack your things," he told them. "We're leaving." "Leaving?" someone asked. "Where?" "Home. Earth. The colonies. Anywhere but here." Tae-soo looked at each of them. "The coalition has made it clear what we mean to them. Nothing, so we're done serving them." Hyjin was already at her station in the Environmental Control Center. She pulled up the systems she had maintained for 8 years. The improvements she had made, the modifications that kept everything running smoothly. She documented every single one in a file and saved it to the central computer. Then she locked the advanced systems behind passwords only she knew. Let the Voltesh figure it out themselves. Within 72 hours, Coalition Station Primus lost 40% of its operational staff. The environmental systems that Hyjin had maintained began failing almost immediately. The Voltesh engineers she had trained tried to fix them, but they didn't understand her modifications. They had never bothered to learn. Across coalition space, The same scene repeated itself. Humans leaving their posts, taking their knowledge with them. Ships losing their maintenance crews. Stations losing their engineers. The coalition had never realized how much they depended on human expertise, because they had never valued it. Admiral Hyun-sik and every human officer under his command resigned simultaneously. They took their ships with them. Vessels that were technically coalition property, but were crewed entirely by humans. The coalition fleet lost 18% of its vessels overnight, but that wasn't the worst of it. The worst was that they lost the people who actually knew how those vessels worked. The Voltesh captains had given orders, but human crews had made the ships run. Now the ships were there, but nobody knew how to maintain them properly. On Earth, Prime Coordinator Dahe addressed the planet in a broadcast that was heard across the galaxy. For 147 years, we have served the coalition faithfully. We asked only to be treated with basic dignity. We were denied. We asked to be heard. We were ignored. We asked for our lives to be valued equally with others. We were told we were acceptable losses. She paused, letting the words sink in. No more. Humanity withdraws from the coalition. We will save our people from the 43 colonies marked for abandonment. We will defend ourselves. We will stand on our own. And if the coalition wishes our help in the future, they will have to ask for it. As equals. The message ended. The galaxy watched in shock, as humanity did what no protected species had ever done before. They walked away. The Coalition Council met in emergency session 3 days after the human withdrawal. The chamber was chaos. Representatives from dozens of species shouted over each other, demanding answers, assigning blame, predicting disaster. Supreme Commander Veltor stood before them, his 4 arms clasped behind his back in a gesture of barely controlled fury. The humans have crippled our war effort, he reported. Station Primus is operating at 30% capacity. The fleet has lost critical maintenance personnel. Our supply lines are disrupted. And the Kryn continue to advance. Can we replace the human workers? Someone asked. We are trying. But it turns out the humans were performing tasks that others refused to do, or didn't know how to do. Veltor's admission clearly pained him. We never documented their work properly. We never thought we needed to. Meanwhile, humanity moved with purpose and speed that shocked the galaxy. The evacuation of the 43 doomed colonies began immediately. Every human ship, from massive colony transports to small personal vessels, joined the effort. 290 million people needed to be moved. The coalition had calculated it would take 6 months minimum, which was why they had written those colonies off. The Kryn would reach them in 3. Humanity did it in 3 weeks. They didn't evacuate into coalition space. Instead, they moved their people to new worlds beyond coalition borders. Places they had been quietly surveying for decades. Worlds the coalition had dismissed as unsuitable because they required too much work to terraform. Humans didn't mind work. On Earth, Ki-tae stood in a secure military facility deep beneath the mountains of Korea. Around him, holographic displays showed star charts, ship designs, weapons schematics. This room had been sealed since first contact, 147 years ago. Unseal everything, he ordered. The archives opened. Detailed scans of every coalition vessel that humans had ever served on. Complete maps of every station they had helped build. Defensive system specifications. Weapons data. Supply routes. Communications. Protocols. For 147 years, while the coalition had dismissed humans as primitive and simple, those humans had been quietly documenting everything. Every ship they maintained, they scanned. Every station they worked on, they mapped. Every system they repaired, they studied. The coalition had never noticed. Why would they? Humans were just workers, just technicians, just simple laborers who couldn't possibly be doing anything sophisticated. But the most shocking discovery came when Ki-tae opened the research archives. The coalition believed that humans had stopped advancing technologically after first contact. Why develop new weapons when the Voltesh had planet crackers? Why research new drives when coalition technology was already faster? It made sense. It was logical. It was also completely wrong. Hidden in deep space, far from coalition sensors, humanity had continued to advance. Not in the same direction as coalition technology, but in their own way. They couldn't match Valtesh firepower, so they didn't try. Instead, they focused on what humans did best: adaptation, innovation, unpredictability. The first new human warship emerged from a hidden construction facility near Jupiter. It didn't look like Coalition vessels, all sleek lines and obvious power. It looked almost crude by comparison, but its systems were designed with 147 years of stolen Coalition knowledge, combined with human creativity. Admiral Hyun-sik reviewed the specifications with something close to pride. Adaptive shielding that changed frequency randomly. Weapons that could reconfigure themselves mid-battle. Electronic warfare systems designed to confuse and disrupt. Ships that could operate independently or coordinate in ways that mimicked the Kryn hive mind. Not bigger. Not more powerful. Just smarter. More flexible. More human. Within a month, humanity deployed a fleet of 300 vessels. Small by Coalition standards. But every ship was crewed by people who understood warfare not as a matter of doctrine, but as an art that required creativity. The Coalition watched these developments with growing alarm. Some called for military action against humanity, for taking Coalition secrets and building unauthorized weapons. But they had bigger problems. The Kryn had broken through another defensive line. More worlds were falling, and the Coalition's fleet, stripped of its human maintenance crews, was falling apart faster than the Kryn could destroy it. Ships broke down mid-battle. Stations lost critical systems. The mighty Valtesh Empire, which had ruled for thousands of years, was crumbling. On Coalition Station Primus, the situation had become critical. The environmental systems were failing more each day. The Valtesh engineers had managed to get basic functions working, but nothing like what Heejin had maintained. Commander Tae-soo received a message from his replacement, a Valtesh officer named Keltor. "We need you to return," Keltor said, his pride clearly wounded by having to make this request. "The station is in danger of total system failure. Find someone else," Tae-soo replied calmly. He was on Earth now, watching the sunset over Seoul. He hadn't seen Earth's sun in 12 years. It was beautiful. "There is no one else. You and your people are the only ones who understand these systems. Then I suggest you learn. We documented everything before we left. The files are in the central computer. We've found your files. They're encrypted. We need the access codes." Tae-soo smiled. "Those codes are available to Coalition citizens. Unfortunately, as a member of a protected species, I'm not qualified to have access to sensitive Coalition systems. Your rules. Not mine." He ended the transmission. Similar scenes played out across Coalition space. Desperate requests for human help. Polite refusals. The tables had turned so completely that it would have been funny if the situation weren't so dire. Back on Earth, Nara completed the ledger. 30,000 pages documenting 147 years of systematic humiliation. She released it publicly, broadcasting it on every frequency that reached Coalition space. Every species in the galaxy could now read the full account. The 47 miners at Hana Station. The thousands of denied requests for basic equipment. The forced relocations. The cultural suppression. The casual cruelty. All of it, documented in excruciating detail. The response was immediate and unexpected. 7 other species that had been classified as protected read the ledger and recognized their own experiences in it. Within days, they too demanded renegotiation of their status. The Coalition was fracturing. The war was being lost. And the humans who had been dismissed as primitive and simple were now the ones watching from a distance. Secure in their own space, under their own rule, Prime Coordinator Da-hae received daily messages from Coalition officials. Threats, at first. Then warnings. Then, finally, requests. Could humanity reconsider? Could they negotiate? Could they at least discuss terms? Her response was always the same. "When you're ready to talk to us as equals, let us know." The Coalition wasn't ready. Not yet. Pride dies hard, especially pride that has existed for thousands of years. But the Kryn kept coming, and the Coalition kept losing. And with every defeat, the calls for humanity's help grew louder. In his quarters on Mars, Admiral Hyun-sik reviewed intelligence reports on the Kryn advance. His plan, rejected months ago by the War Council, sat on his desk. It would still work. The Kryn were predictable in their unpredictability, if you understood the pattern. But that plan had been offered freely, when humanity still considered itself part of the coalition. That time had passed. Now, if the coalition wanted human help, they would have to pay for it. Not with credits or resources, but with something far more valuable: respect, recognition, equality. And based on the latest reports from coalition space, where stations were failing and fleets were crumbling, that payment would come soon. The only question was whether it would come in time to matter. The Kryn broke through the coalition's last major defensive line on a cold morning in March. 17 worlds fell in a single week. The Voltesh homeworld itself was now under threat. The empire that had ruled for 10,000 years was facing extinction. In the Coalition Council chamber, panic had replaced pride. Representatives screamed at each other, searching for someone to blame. The Voltesh delegation sat in stunned silence, watching their civilization crumble. Supreme Commander Veltor stood alone at the center of the chamber. He had lost 3 fleets in 2 months. His officers were exhausted. His ships were breaking down, and the enemy kept adapting faster than his forces could respond. He had one option left. One chance. And it required him to do something no Voltesh commander had done in recorded history. He had to ask for help. Real help. From humans. The journey to Earth took 3 days. Veltor traveled alone, in a small personal ship, without guards or ceremony. When he landed at the spaceport in Seoul, there was no formal reception, just a simple car that took him to a modest government building. Prime Coordinator Da-hai waited for him in a conference room. No throne, no elevated platform, no symbols of power. Just a table and chairs. She gestured for him to sit across from her. They sat in silence for a moment. Veltor looked at this human. This representative of a species he had always considered primitive. She looked back at him calmly. Waiting. "I came to request your help," Veltor finally said. The words tasted like ash in his mouth. "I know why you came," Da-hai replied. "The question is, what you're offering in return. What do you want? Resources? Territory? Technology?" Veltor was ready to negotiate. He had authorization from the Council to offer substantial compensation. "We want what we've always wanted. Recognition as equals. Full voting rights in the Coalition Council. The immediate release of all humans imprisoned for crimes against Coalition officials. And the authority to command our own forces." "That's not possible. The Coalition Charter." "The Coalition Charter," Da-hai interrupted gently, "classified us as protected species in need of supervision. That charter is why we left. If you want our help, that charter needs to change." Veltor closed his eyes. She was asking him to overturn thousands of years of tradition. To admit that the Voltesh had been wrong. To give power to a species they had controlled for nearly 150 years. But the alternative was extinction. "And if I agree to these terms?" he asked. "Then Admiral Hyun-sik will implement his battle plan. The one your War Council rejected. The one that can actually stop the Kryn. You're that confident? We're that prepared. We've been preparing for 147 years, Supreme Commander. Every time you dismissed us, we learned. Every time you refused our ideas, we remembered them. Every time you told us we were primitive, we quietly proved you wrong." Da-hai leaned forward. "We don't want to watch the galaxy burn. We don't want revenge. We just want to be treated as what we are. People. Equals, citizens of our own destiny." Veltor stood and walked to the window. He could see the city of Seoul spreading out below. Millions of humans going about their lives. Free. Independent. No longer bowing to coalition authority. He thought about his homeworld. About the billions of Voltesh who would die if the Kryn weren't stopped. About the empire that would fall. About the legacy of his civilization. Pride or survival. The choice was simple when put in those terms. "I accept your terms," he said quietly. "All of them." The new charter was signed 1 week later. Humanity became a full member species of the coalition, with equal voting rights. The classification of protected species was eliminated entirely. 7 other species who had been similarly oppressed were granted the same status. Commander Wu Jin was released from detention after serving only 6 months of his 20-year sentence. When he returned to Hana Station, now renamed Freedom Station, 3,000 miners were waiting for him. They had built a memorial for the 47 who died. A simple monument that bore their names and a single line. They taught us we could say no. Admiral Hyun Sik's battle plan was implemented immediately. The coalition fleet was reorganized, with human commanders given authority over mixed-species battle groups. The rigid doctrine that had failed repeatedly was replaced with flexible tactics that changed with each engagement. The first battle using the new strategy took place near the Valtesh homeworld. The Kryn came in their usual formation, expecting the predictable coalition response. Instead, they encountered something they had never faced before: chaos. Human ships moved erratically, breaking formation and reforming in unexpected patterns. They used electronic warfare to confuse Kryn coordination. They employed tactics from Earth's military history, strategies that made no sense to the hive mind but worked devastatingly well. The Kryn adapted, as they always did. But by the time they adjusted to one tactic, the humans had switched to another, and another, and another. For the first time since the war began, the coalition won a major engagement. The war continued for 8 more months, but the tide had turned. Human creativity and adaptability, combined with coalition resources and technology, proved to be exactly what was needed. The Kryn were pushed back, system by system. When the final Kryn vessel was destroyed, the galaxy celebrated. But the real change had already happened. The coalition had been transformed. On Coalition Station Primus, He-jin returned to her old position. But not as a maintenance worker. She was now the coalition's chief engineering officer, reporting directly to the council. Her first act was to implement all the efficiency improvements she had designed years ago. The improvements that had been rejected as too primitive. They worked perfectly. Soo-jin established the coalition's first interspecies medical academy on Earth. Students from dozens of worlds came to learn. Working alongside human doctors who shared their knowledge freely, the academy's motto was simple: all lives have value. Tae-soo took command of Coalition Station Primus, the first human to hold that position. He walked through corridors where he had once been treated as second class, now greeted with respect by representatives from across the galaxy. On Earth, Nara's ledger became required reading in coalition schools. Not as a tool for revenge, but as a reminder. A warning about what happens when any group considers themselves superior to others. When convenience matters more than dignity. When regulations matter more than lives. The day humans said enough became a galactic holiday. Celebrated not just by humans but by dozens of species. It marked the moment when the galaxy learned an important lesson. Humanity wasn't special because they were stronger than others. They weren't special because they were smarter. They were special because of something the coalition had never valued. They remembered. They remembered every slight. Every humiliation. Every time they were told they didn't matter. And instead of becoming bitter, instead of seeking revenge, they used those memories to become better, stronger, more capable. And when the galaxy finally recognized them as equals, they didn't gloat. They didn't demand tribute. They simply got to work, helping to rebuild what the war had destroyed. Prime Coordinator Da-hye stood before the Coalition Council 2 years after the war ended. She had been invited to address them, to speak about humanity's role in the new order. "We don't ask for gratitude," she said. "We don't ask for special treatment. We ask only for what every sentient being deserves: respect, dignity, the freedom to determine our own path." She paused, looking at the assembled representatives. "For 147 years, we were told our place. We learned it well. We learned that our place is not where others assign us, but where we choose to stand. We choose to stand as equals, as partners, as free people, among free people." The council chamber erupted in applause. Not polite, obligatory applause, but genuine appreciation. Later that night, Dahai stood on the observation deck of Coalition Station Primus, looking out at the stars. Tae-Soo joined her, two humans who had lived through the transition from oppression to equality. "Do you think it will last?" Tae-Soo asked. "This new understanding? I think it will last as long as we remember," Dahai replied. "As long as we tell the story of the 47 miners. As long as we teach the next generation what we learned. As long as we never forget what it felt like to be dismissed, ignored, considered expendable. And if others forget?" Dahai smiled. "Then we'll remind them. Gently at first. But if necessary, we'll remind them the way we reminded the Coalition. By showing them what happens when humanity says enough." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching ships come and go. Human ships, Valtesh ships, vessels from 100 different worlds, all moving freely through space that belonged to everyone. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Underestimate humanity at your peril. Not because humans were the strongest, or the smartest, or the most advanced, but because humanity remembered. And when pushed far enough, when their dignity was finally stripped away completely, humans did something that no one expected. They stood up, and the galaxy would never forget the day they did.